think she knew from the very beginning she did not want to be like her mother, her older sister, and I think she knew. I know. Well, I don't know. I do kind of want to be friends with her, so if she's
Oh my
watching.
God, me too.
I mean, I don't know. She can hang out with us. We're so fun.
Welcome to Rock and Roll Book Club, where we discuss books by and about musicians and the music industry. I'm Shelley, and on this episode, me and my co-hosts Dave and Jen are discussing Orenda Fink's The Witch's Daughter. Orenda Fink is a singer, songwriter, and multi-instrumentalist who grew up with a mother who claimed to practice witchcraft and had borderline personality disorder. While the book covers Orenda's musical journey, which includes an extensive solo career, as well as membership in Little Red Rocket, Azure Ray, High Up, Art in Manila, O+S, and Closeness, the book takes us far beyond sex, drugs, and rock and roll into deeply personal and often traumatic territory, as well as the way she's worked to heal herself. This book is truly a can't miss. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that although we'll be discussing mental illness in this episode, it's important to remember we are not psychiatrists, psychologists, or therapists. These discussions could be triggering for individuals who have had relationships with mentally ill family or friends, and particularly those with borderline personality disorder. Other sensitive topics discussed today include mental and physical child abuse and addiction. Welcome to Rock and Roll Book Club. So excited to have you all here today. I'm here with Jen and Dave, my co-hosts, and today we are going to be covering Orenda Fink's The Witch's Daughter. And let me tell you, if you have not read this or listened to this book, it is the wildest of wild journeys and an absolute page turner, I say. I have high praise for this book, but we will absolutely get into that. So, real quick reminder for everyone, if you're not following us on socials, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook. So look for Rock and Roll Book Club. And obviously, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do that too. But either way, we're glad to have you here. All right. Well, Dave, do you want to get us kicked off with a little history lesson here?
This is Orenda's first novel, so most people do know her from her musical career. She is most often affiliated with the Athens, Georgia music scene. Okay, she's best known for the group Azure Ray, which is a sort of indie folk pop duo with her and her friend Maria Taylor. But she's also been involved in a number of other groups, including Little Red Rocket, which is a group when she was in high school. There's a group called O+S. There's another group called Art in Manila. There's another group called the Casket Girls. There's another group called High Up with her and her sister. Plus, she has a number of solo albums as well. And I'm a fan of her music and have been following her for kind of a long time. Nowadays, Orenda is affiliated more with the Omaha music scene, which is odd because she no longer lives here. But she did move to Omaha because of her husband, Todd Fink, who's the singer of The Faint, and she made a lot of her solo records in and around Omaha. So some people know her from Athens, some people know her from Omaha, but that's Orenda Fink. All of her music is varying degrees of great, though.
I agree. Yeah. I knew her from Azure Ray for sure, but I had no idea how much solo work she'd done. I didn't know that she was in some of the bands that like High Up and Art in Manila. I did not know that. But I like all of it and it's great.
I did make a playlist. I'll put the image here on the screen and the link down below, Spotify and Apple. It's not all inclusive, but I did try to include all of her various groups and at least one or two songs off of her all of her solo records. And I'm going to say this, once you've read the book, put the playlist back on. The very first song called Bloodline. Yes. You will hear that song in a totally new way after reading this book. I 100% did, because I've known that song for 20 years. Always thought it was a cool tune. But now, knowing what I know now about the book, and I'm not trying to spoil anything, I hear it totally differently.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Agreed.
Yeah. Agreed.
knew very little. I mean, I knew her name. I was not really all that familiar with her music, and I didn't know much, guys. I didn't know much.
Well, thanks for taking the journey.
You're welcome. I really have enjoyed the journey, and I kind of love her.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Excellent.
do. Okay.
My impressions are that I'm a complete fan. I mean, I do really like her music. I liked Azure Ray a lot. I like her solo records. I like Tie Up. I'm not as I just learned about this Casket Girls just a few days ago, so I can't say that I'm up to speed on that stuff. I do know the O+S and Art in Manila, so I'm a fan of her music. I've been following her music for a very long time, so this was interesting to me because I knew nothing about her life other than she was married to the guy in the Faint.
Yeah.
That's the extent of her personal life that I've ever really known about the 20 plus years that I've been listening to her music.
Yeah, I have to agree. I knew nothing of her personal life other than she's married to Todd Fink, and who took her last name. I get we should note if you don't know that.
Right. He was Todd Beckley back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lead singer of the Faint, for those who don't know. And I've seen her play, but other than that, didn't know much. I guess other than maybe that she lived in Omaha for a while and came from kind of the Athens scene. But as we learn in the book, she actually grew up in Alabama for the most part. So that was new to me as well.
Alabama should almost be a character in this book.
Yeah, right?
I agree. Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
There's so much about you learn about Alabama. Not necessarily making me like it anymore, but just learned a lot more about Alabama than I ever knew before. That's for sure.
She grew up incredibly poor. I mean, her family sat down and prayed to have money for food. She talked about how, they ate poor Southern food, like potatoes and onions, and basically potatoes in any way, shape, or form. But her mom said that potato soup was the way to get them to go farthest. And so it's really amazing to me to think about how she came from incredibly humble beginnings and, now lives in the desert and has lived a rock star lifestyle and, does like Jungian dream consulting as a business now. And I mean, just such an incredible amount of growth since she was a child. What stood out to you guys about her childhood?
I was just surprised by the depth of the poverty and just how, you think about, people who are poor or who have less than or whatever. I've always grown up and very fortunate to have been kind of upper middle class or whatever, but you just never really realize how it is for some people. And, this was constantly moving in the middle of the night, and there's always a reason why you move in the middle of the night, right? Because you're running from something. Living in all these tiny weird little places, and yeah, it was a very, very strange childhood. And knowing what I know about Orenda, which admittedly is not a ton, it is really, really amazing that she is able to accomplish what she has, coming from such a just dirt poor background. Because no matter how smart you are, if you're not given the right opportunities because of your home life or what, that it can affect your life no matter what. It's not a question of being dumb versus smart. There are a lot of people who just don't have the opportunity or never given that opportunity.
I'm going to say something.
Yes.
I think she knew from the very beginning she did not want to be like her mother, her older sister, and I think she knew. I don't know. I do kind of want to be friends with her, so she's watching.
Oh my God, me too.
I mean, I don't know. She can hang out with us. We're so fun. But I honestly, she was aware of what was going on around her at such a young age. And the more she realized how unusual it was, and I don't mean to put words in her mouth, this is just what's in my head coming out. She was getting out of there, and she was talented. So she found a way to get out.
Yeah, and I think that, she might have gone the academic route if she hadn't found the performing arts school, because she's incredibly smart. I mean, she doesn't say that she's smart in the book, but it's very, very clear. She was in the gifted program, and even just the way that she's navigated life, it takes so much intellect to be able to do that. One thing I think is interesting is that, she, to your point, both of you, she knew they were poor. And I think that has a lot to do with her mom, who plays a central figure in this book, if you couldn't figure that out, because it's called The Witch's Daughter. This can't be a spoiler, because basically the book is about growing up and dealing with a mom with borderline personality disorder. And so, where, I did not grow up privileged. I mean, I don't know how broke we were. I just knew that, it wasn't like I got everything I wanted as a child and all the toys, and we lived in a humble home. And, but my parents shielded that from me. And I think a lot of parents shield that from their kids because they don't want them to feel burdened by it. But her mom, with her borderline personality disorder, and I don't want to pretend like I know a ton about that, other than what some things I'd learned before this, and many things that we learn in the book. But it's very much about her. It's very much
everything's about her.
Everything is about her.
And could you imagine growing up and not realizing what was wrong with your mother? You just never know what you're going to get, and everything revolves around her. From moving in the middle of the night to people coming to get them, to her being. I mean, what the heck? I mean,
well, and we know that now as her borderline personality disorder, but as the title implies, The Witch's Daughter, she was growing up thinking it was something completely different. Her mom told everyone she was a witch and she cast spells and that she had all these demons and whatever. And so that's how she grew up thinking, was the reason why my mom is the way that she is because she's a witch.
Yeah.
And that's the behavior associated with being a witch. And she felt that way for a long time. And I don't know, it's hard to say whether beyond when you're a child and you hear this and you believe what your parents tell you, like how long into her life before she said, I don't think my mom's actually a witch. Like, I think it took probably into her 20s before this borderline personality concept entered into the picture. And she realized, oh, that's what it is. Okay. I wonder how long she did wonder, like, is my mom actually a witch? Like, where does it, because that is the title. That is a big part of it. That was her personality. That was how the mom was known, to the extent that they socialized with other people, because it seems like they mostly stayed at home and never left the house. At least the mom never did. That was a big part of her thing, was I'm a witch.
And she, the incident that I talked about where they joined hands and prayed for money for food. So the next day, her dad finds a $20 bill at work and goes around asking, is this anybody's money? And everybody says no. And so he keeps it and he brings it home. And it's this miracle for them that they have money for food. And if I remember correctly, Orenda says something like, that really made me feel like, wow, prayer really works. And then her mom says, that wasn't prayer, that was me. And that was only one instance where she showed evidence that she was a witch. And so how could you not think your mom's a witch? So we find out later in the book that she's a witch in another way. So not in the supernatural way, but Orenda eventually does read a book about borderline personality disorder, and learns that there are 4 categorizations for people with that. And her mom falls into the witch category, which is just wild. So it's like, if you didn't believe she was a witch in the one way, she surely was a witch in the other. And, she talks about several ways in which her mom aligns with the characteristics of the witch borderline personality.
One of the consistent parts of the story is Orenda and her mother sitting around at night drinking beer, the mother getting shit-faced, and all of this vitriol comes out when she is drunk, and just so much nastiness and so much meanness. Not that she's nice when she's sober, because clearly she wasn't either, but this becomes this routine. And she demanded an audience of like, you couldn't just be like, Mom, I'm tired, I'm going to go to bed. You need to sit here and listen to me while I tell you all the ways that you've wronged me. It's like that, the Seinfeld thing with, what's the holiday that he made up?
Festivus.
Where he's like, I'm going to tell you people all the ways that you wronged me this year or whatever.
The airing of the grievances.
Exactly what it was.
And she does that every night. It's the airing of grievances every night, drinking Coors Light, smoking cigarettes, and bitching. And that's a big part of that personality. Nothing is ever good enough. Nothing is right. Everybody's wrong. You're stupid. You're dumb. You're lazy. You're a failure. You're this.
I'm the best.
She's perfect. 100%. This is the person that you grow up with and you spend your life with. And just to deal with that, man.
And you look to her to provide you with comfort and words of wisdom and helping you grow and helping you be and understand. And she didn't get any of that. Or maybe if she'd get a little bit, an hour later, it'd be different.
And her dad was the nice one.
Yeah.
And for the most part, throughout the book, he is the sort of better of the two parents, or the one that can be relied on mostly. Now I say most of the book because that does change towards the end. I think there was a definite difference in the dad's attitude and the way he was acting towards the end of the book, where there was an actual change. But he seemed to be the rational one. I know what you think, but just please apologize to her and make her understand that she didn't do anything wrong and that you don't feel bad. Because otherwise she's like, fuck you, writes you off. I'm going to throw all your shit away. I'm going to take all your childhood memories. I'm throwing them in the trash, whatever, unless you appease her by saying, you're sorry. I didn't mean it what I said. You could push me for 4 hours until I finally explode. And then I say something and I'm the one that has to apologize because you can't deal with any sort of negativity.
I'll tell you what, it's easier for him if whatever he needs them to do is done. So that way he can get on with his day, or his half hour or his hour, because you don't know what's coming next. But, he's her prisoner in many ways. At the same time, they're probably completely codependent on each other.
Oh, yeah. He's also her enabler.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because to me, Orenda didn't say this, but to me, his first priority was defending and pacifying the mom, and his second priority was his kids. And while I understand that having a spouse who has this disorder probably demands that of you a lot, I was left feeling like he did not stand up for them, or even himself, in ways that could have been a hell of a lot healthier. And another thing that's I understand is a hallmark of borderline personality disorder is that these people are terrified of people leaving them, but somehow, and it doesn't really make sense to us because our brains think differently, but in the process of that, they push people away. And as a means, I guess, to test them to see if they will come back. But sometimes they just push them all the way away.
She separated from her family a little bit in high school and went to that arts school, right? That her dad drove her to because it was closer to where he worked. And so he would drive her to the classes or whatever. But like, I really did think, and I mentioned it already earlier, that was a massive turning point. Like, yes, she could have gone on to do other things besides live in a small town and whatever. But like, I think the fact that she went into that high school, she had enough talent to get there. She meets Maria Taylor.
Because her mom, Maria Taylor's mom, was her guidance counselor and had told her, you're going to get into college. And she was like, wait, what? No, I don't have any money. I don't. And she was like, no, you have to go to college. You're brilliant. This needs to happen. And then ended up meeting Pat's daughter, Maria.
Right.
And so that's how that started. And neither of them really were like musicians even. I mean, they were both like, they'd never been in a band, and they were like, and Maria was like, hey, you want to be in a band? And she's like, yeah.
Right.
And they kind of learned from each other.
Maria played guitar. Orenda had never been in a band or never done anything. But yeah, the meeting of them, the guidance counselor mom and the introduction to them, and that got her out of Alabama, because yes, that high school was in Alabama. It was the, I don't know, Alabama School for the Arts or whatever it was, or Birmingham School for the Arts. But then her and Maria are most closely associated with being from Athens, Georgia. And that's ultimately where they went off to. She finally got out of Alabama, got to Georgia, and they were still like high school age when they got signed to a major record company contract, like a Geffen Records, of a high school band that had barely ever played and had never made a demo, never made a 7-inch single, never done anything. That to me was extremely impressive. Little Red Rocket, which is a band that I still have never heard of, because they do tell in the story the reason why we've never heard of them. And that was largely because the album never actually really came out. I mean, the Geffen Records thing never actually came out. I just think that going to that art school was the key. I mean, I think maybe the most significant event in her life, and was the most course correcting, course changing, whatever thing of everything.
Well, and I think if she had Pat, the guidance counselor, and made a beautiful friendship with Maria, I mean, that's a lovely friendship, and just the people that believed in her, and they saw things in her. I can't speak for her because we're not friends yet, but we will. But just to have a perspective of being away from the craziness and the uncertainty, and having someone say, we're getting you there.
Yeah.
To see your worth, to see the fact that there's someone that will help you, that wants you to do well. There's Maria, who is a beautiful friend to her.
She goes to this other place, and all of these other people are like, wow, you really have something here. Like, you're talented. Like, you're good. You're this, you're that. And it just, I could see how it could affect just a lot.
Well, and in her childhood, she didn't have the opportunity to stick with a lot of her friends because they moved so often.
Right.
And she finally did develop some friendships before she went to that high school. But then going there, she sort of started to split off from those friends and couldn't really identify with them anymore. And so I think that, the guidance counselor and Maria Taylor clearly played a huge role in her development and were such a positive force for her that she probably really needed. Let's talk about her sisters. Jen, did you have any impressions of them, or do you want to give us like a recap of who's who and the role they played in her life?
Okay, so Charlotte is her older sister. And please don't correct me, because there's only so much I retain these days. Charlotte, they were never close from the start. I mean, I think that they were just, two people living in the same home. And as Christine develops onward, I mean, I'm sorry, Charlotte develops onward. She most likely has, I mean, was she ever diagnosed with borderline?
I don't think so. No,
I don't think she was. And I wonder whether she was or not. She was certainly she was the first child. She had to deal with that mom alone when she was in development, her developmental years. And I know that's big when you're very little. But I don't know, Shelley, if you were planning on addressing this later, but there was a thing where the mother said, well, I was molested when I was a child by her father. And that made me immediately think, aha, that's the cause of all of it. And that must have happened to Charlotte too, because that's why she is the way that she is. And I immediately jumped to that of, well, that must have happened to her too. But now it's really, well, that didn't happen to her as far as we know, Charlotte.
Yeah. Well, and we learn later in the book, and this is a spoiler, so fast forward if you haven't read it and plan to. We do find out toward the end of the book that it didn't happen to the mom at all. No. And that was a total lie. And she used that as a means of manipulation, so that when the pressure really started coming down from Orenda or from Christine, she just trots that fact out and gains their sympathy, and it kind of puts the pressure off of her. So
because it worked.
It did work. Well, of course it worked, because they have such empathy for her. That's a horrible thing.
Right. And I immediately, while listening to the book, when that was brought up, I was like, well, that explains it. All of this behavior from the mother, I can excuse, almost not excuse, because it's, but like I at least understand the basis for it, like, because that does screw you up for the rest of your life.
But it didn't happen.
But it didn't happen. So that's the other part of it. It was just like, wow, that's so much worse that you lied about it. It's one thing to just be a shitty parent and to have this, okay, but then on top of it, to have lied to gain sympathy, or to at least get people to stop coming down on you, to say that you were a victim of being a child molesting, and from your own father too.
But at the end of the day, that's her disease talking. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, and that's what we have to remember here. And you don't know
because nothing can be her fault. Everything has to be somebody else's fault. So it couldn't be her fault.
Okay, so Christine, like I could be friends with Christine as well. She just came along, and I think she put a little bit of light, as Orenda said. I mean, she kind of brightened things up, and there was someone there that brought some joy. And as time went on, that faded. But
her and Christine had a really good relationship.
Yeah,
and
out of the gate.
Christine did live in Omaha for a brief period of time. I don't claim to have known her. I met her once. But they have a very strong bond. And I'm going to do something that we don't ordinarily do. I'm going to show you a little clip with Orenda and Christine in their band together, High Up. This was a video that I shot. Okay, and that's Christine in the blonde hair. And Orenda is playing the trumpet in the corner. And her husband, Todd, is playing guitar, wearing the black hat there. And that's our friend Crystal standing over there in the back corner, Shelley.
Oh, that's Crystal. And then Matt's on the drums.
Right. So, yeah, we know a couple of people from that. But that was a band that Christine and Orenda did together. And Orenda wrote the songs herself so that Christine could have this way to express, because she's a really good singer.
Yeah.
But she wasn't a writer. She was just a singer. So Orenda wrote the songs for Christine to sing. And they had this one-off band called High Up, which, they only had the one album, but it's a very good album for those curious.
But the fact that those two are together, they live on the same property, now present day. Am I right on that, guys? They live. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. She was moving out to California. Yeah.
So
okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So to be with your sister, they were survivors of that really, really shitty, awful storm. And they have each other, and they have, their partners and such. But the fact that they're together is like, just warms my heart.
Yeah, same. And she dedicates the book to Christine and notes that she was an early reader and editor of the manuscript, and that helped to kind of, they swapped stories and came to a consensus on, what the true story was. And I just love that idea of them being able to reconstruct what happened and make sense of it together, instead of Orenda having to do that on her own.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and Orenda got her out. Orenda stayed on her and was with her every step of the way of getting out of her parents' house, because she had gone back to live there. I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead way too far.
No, you're right. Okay. You're right. She did move back in there, and that was a real tense part in the book, because, Orenda's mom had originally been pretty nice to Christine's husband. And they were friends, and they were friendly and stuff. Something happened as per usual with a narcissistic person with borderline personality disorder, and she started focusing all of her anger on him.
Yep.
And they had to get out of that house. Like they just had to. And Orenda was like, you need to leave now. You need to go. Just do not collect your $200. Do not pass go. Just fucking go. And Christine was very hesitant because she didn't want to like maybe burn that final bridge. And they almost were like, well, you know, she says in the book, like she almost got to a point where I was going to have to cut off Christine if she wasn't going to cut off their parents. Like I can't be apart from them and then talk to you every day where all I do is hear about the same shit. And it did get really tense. And then finally Christine left and got the hell out of there and then never had to live with her parents again. I don't think. I mean, she said to stop back to visit, but never had to live there again. That was a pretty intense moment.
And so eventually Christine does leave, but she still has things there. And so she has to go back and get them. And in the meantime, Orenda has decided, I'm going no contact. Christine has decided she's going no contact, but they can't do it until they get the stuff. And that was like months of having to make that really tough decision. And also Christine having to take that step to make it happen. And that's sort of how that all came to a head, that they decided, okay, we're in it together and we are not going to have contact with them anymore. Because Christine essentially got X'd while she was living in the house. They stopped talking to her. They didn't acknowledge her, even though she was there to help them. And so those are kind of some of the like really difficult situations that, and not even the wildest story in the book, but just really heartbreaking and harrowing situations that those girls went through.
Yeah, because the mother was really so petty. I mean, paid no attention to Orenda's music career, didn't really care, didn't seem to pay attention when she had these successes. The mom was just like, whatever. There was that time where Christine was going to put on a concert up in her room when she was living in the house, and it was going to be online. It was like an online concert or something. And that day was the day that the mother chose to get a new stereo, or to pull out the stereo from the garage to bring it indoors so she could blast her music at the exact same time that Christine was doing her show upstairs. Like, just to be a bitch. She had to like do that. And it's like, that's such a glaring example of, I can't let you even have a positive minute.
Yeah.
I'm going to ruin your 1 minute. Your one bit of happiness. You've been practicing this show and now you're about to do it. And now I'm going to just choose to be an asshole and blare my music downstairs so that it interferes with what you're doing. I mean,
and that seems like the disease again, right? Like,
I mean, it gets to the point of where you almost, how mad can you really be at her? She's got a disease.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, just the disappointment and the neglect and the abuse that everyone in this household had to deal with, you know, it's survival of the fittest. You get out and you have to figure out what to do. It's still your core. It's your parents. Like, what are you going to do? Leave them high and dry? That's the other thing.
That's it's so hard to cut off your parents, because even though we're recounting all of these horrible incidents, it's not as though the mother was probably awful 365 days a year. Like, there were probably times where she did act more motherly or whatever. It's not, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing that the reason why it's so difficult to cut off is because sometimes it does kind of ease back a little bit. And maybe it's not quite as intense and she's not quite as scary, not quite as mean. And you think, well, maybe she's turned a corner. Maybe we're on the mend where things are, and then of course she goes right back to the way she was. But that is why it's so difficult, I think.
And that's also the cycle of abuse, is to, you know, everything is fine. Then things start to ramp up. Then there's a big conflict. Then there's the apology and the love bombing. Not to say that her mom wasn't love bombing. I wouldn't describe it as that, but the, you know, bringing you back into the fold, and then the cycle starts again. And it kind of seems like that might've been the case for them. And again, I will say that none of us, we are not psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists. No. Like, we do not know, like, we do not know the ins and outs of this disease whatsoever. And it's really important for us to be respectful to both
Absolutely.
people with this disease and people dealing with people who have it. And I think really we are just speaking out of sympathy for Orenda and her family. And, you know, and we're trying to be really careful about the subject matter in this book. It's a really, really tough one. But I would also say it's one that, gosh, of any of the books that we have discussed, this is the must read. It has to be so hard to figure out, you know, in a life of chaos and conflict and drama, you know, how do you pick the stories to include and how do you tell them so succinctly? And, you know, just the process of figuring out what goes in the book, I had to be such an incredibly hard thing. I mean, just very emotionally challenging, but also just really challenging as a writer. And I just respect the hell out of her for even trying to write this book, and then succeeding so grandly.
Well, and it's interesting because she is a musician and she is an artist. The bulk of this book was about her getting to the point of where she was going to survive this, regardless of what happened. I mean, and I just think she just, her life is absolutely incredible, and the highs and the lows. I mean, come on, terrible lows, but she was able to figure out how to take care of herself and how to take care of her sister and get out of this mess.
I do want to talk though about her music career because it is really amazing. And so I do kind of want to talk a little bit more about how she made the leap from the performing arts high school, where she really went to study drama. You know, acting was her thing at that time. And then she said that she discovered that that was maybe not her greatest talent as she started. She was moved over to have to build sets, which she had a great attitude about. But then, you know, when she got a guitar and started to play, that took her in that direction. And then we talked about her meeting Maria Taylor and them starting Little Red Rocket. And then she met a man who lived in Athens and was a musician. And that's kind of what took them to Athens.
I interviewed Orenda probably 10, 11 years ago, right? And
yeah, great interviews, by the way. We're like, please, everyone go revisit those.
I'll put a link to it below. You know, that was ostensibly an interview to promote her new album at the time, Blue Dream. And that was the idea. But it went off into all these other sort of tangents. But the reason why I bring it up is because she was talking about her music career, mentioned Little Red Rocket. I had never heard of that band. I thought I knew her stuff and was like, Little Red Rocket. I tried looking it up, couldn't find anything. And I was like, well, this is really odd. Like, maybe I guess it was never made digitally. I guess I have to find a CD. And then she tells the story about how they were a high school band that got signed to Geffen Records. She even brings up the guy who signed them. I forget his name, but he used to date Courtney Love. And they had this dinner where Courtney was there, and another tie-in with Kathleen Hanna. But the reason why I bring it is because the album never happened. So in other words, they got signed, they got money, they did some photo shoots, they did all this cool stuff. They made the out, never happened.
And they were sent to get new rock and roll clothes. Right. And that's a hilarious story in the book where they like go to the MAC counter and get their makeup done. And they get what they think are like rock star clothes. And then someone thinks that they're working girls. Yeah. And they get back to their A&R guy and they're like, yeah, we know we failed. We know what we look like. And so, we'll do better.
So the reason why you can't find this Little Red Rocket is because the Geffen album doesn't exist. It never actually came out. And that's not an entirely uncommon story. I actually know other bands to which that has happened where they signed to a label, they made the album, the label was like, we're just going to shelve it for whatever reason. So that's the reason why Little Red Rocket. Now, one thing that I, you know, like I said earlier in the book, I didn't know much about Orenda's personal life other than she's married to Todd Fink. But I did not know her tie-in with Jeff Magnuson, who is the guy from Neutral Milk Hotel, which is the part that he was the major Athens guy at the time, like the biggest deal out of Athens, to come along. She got involved in a relationship with him for a little while. And
he wrote a song about her.
Yeah, he wrote a song about her.
She was still in a relationship with a different guy.
Still with his other girlfriend. Yeah. That's fascinating. That's neither here nor there. It's not really about the book, but I never knew that they went out and that they were connected in any way. And that was part of a tie-in with Athens that I never knew about.
One of the really sad parts of the book is that Maria is dating the drummer of Little Red Rocket, and they are coming home from just a regular night out, and he just passes away in the van while Orenda is laying her head in his lap.
That was awful.
And she discovers that, he's no longer living. And Little Red Rocket was like a party band, like it was like super fun. And, they'd get these big crowds and they'd do all these like fun shenanigans. And after that, Orenda Fink says that it just didn't feel right to have that kind of band. And that's really where Azure Ray came out of, where she and Maria Taylor decided to kind of move on and start writing different kinds of music and really explore some of those really difficult emotions that they experienced as a result of his passing.
I couldn't even imagine what Little Red Rocket sounds like. Like, I just want to know, because I can't envision Orenda Fink singing like kind of silly party music, or just like, like I think she said they were similar to maybe Veruca Salt, and I like Veruca Salt. I'm not dissing them, but I don't think of them as very serious. I think of Veruca Salt as more of a fun band. I just can't wrap my head around Orenda Fink doing like sort of more fun music. I'm so used to her as Azure Ray, her solo stuff, that kind of thing, as more thoughtful, more folky, more acoustic based, real beautiful harmonies and this kind of thing. And to think of them jumping up and down on stage, playing loud guitar, and I cannot mentally even imagine it.
Well, so then, we come to a part where Azure Ray splits up, and Orenda Fink eventually gets to a point where she feels like, I don't really know if I can do music anymore. And she's, travels and plays in some other bands, where she's not the front woman and can just like have fun and not worry about the songwriting as much. But she was about ready to quit. And then that's when the, what was it? The Coffin Twins? Casket Girls. Coffin Twins, Casket Girls.
Coffin Twins, yeah. No, that is like I said earlier, like I was shocked that I'd never even heard of this. Now, in my defense,
they kept their identities.
They did
secret.
Not say their names, right? It wasn't like you could look up Orenda Fink and it would be tied to this Casket Girls. But I still thought I was relatively in the know as far as Omaha-based sort of indie music, and I did not know about that. And I feel a little bit out of the loop on that one. So I did download the albums off Apple, but I have not had a chance to listen to them yet. So I can't really say what it's like, but I thought I knew Orenda's musical career, and I missed out on 4 albums worth of material from this other band, the Casket Girl.
I also want to talk about the mystical elements of this book. When I bring that up, what stands out to you guys?
Well, I'm wondering if you guys think, okay, so there's a lot of this mysticism and magic, and my mom is a witch and all of this, and she studies magic to a certain degree, goes to Haiti.
Yeah, that was really cool.
About something. Okay, so there's this exploration of these are the roots of this kind of magic, and the guy there, her tour guide, basically says magic doesn't hurt people, right? Like people hurt people. Like that's what's going on. And your mother's it's not bad magic. Like she was hurt by a person or something. It's not what you think it is. And from that point on, and when we realized that her mother is really just mentally ill and she's not a witch as far as we know, and like the mysticism and the witchcraft and the magic and stuff just kind of went out the window for me for the rest of the book. And I was more focused on this borderline stuff. And was her whole belief, did she even, the mother believe she was a witch? Was that part of her disorder, or did she just, that was like, I mean, I don't know. So the mystical thing kind of changed for me when I sort of realized maybe that it was more about her mental illness and it wasn't really about this, you know, magic or voodoo or whatever it was. And I was focusing more on more sort of real world issues like mental illness and child abuse and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think Orenda, though, has her own relationship with, I don't know how to properly characterize it, but with maybe the supernatural or with like, you know, things beyond the veil. Maybe there's a
power.
What?
An additional power.
Yeah. You know, because she talks about how like her first memory, she says, my first memory was a dream, but also, I don't know. I re-listened to the beginning of it a little bit, and I just felt like now that I know all the players, I kind of want to go back and see how this starts. And so she talks about how, you know, she wakes up in her bed and she looks out the window and she sees her grandfather who's passed away. And she's kind of scared at first, and he's in a rocking chair and he can't walk. But he's like making funny faces at her and like kind of playing with her. Mm-hmm. And then her mom comes into I can't remember if her mom comes into the room or if it was like the next morning, and she said, can we give Grandpa a cane so that he can walk? And why doesn't he walk? Can we give him a cane? And her mom was like, well, no, he's not with us anymore. And she's like, well, I saw him, you know, last night. And I don't know if people believe in ghosts or the supernatural or whatever, but I have listened to many, many stories of people, especially as children, having instances like that where they might be able to see beyond the veil. But then she goes on to talk about, you know, certain dreams that come true, and it just makes you feel like she sort of has this relationship with things that are kind of bigger than us, that are not visible to the naked eye. Mm-hmm. And she just seems very kind of connected in that way. And I think that also took her on that journey of, you know, going to Haiti and discovering like, what are the roots of magic and what is voodoo all about? And I just found that completely fascinating. And just how she went down that path. And was curious about it and learned about it and has tried to learn about her world in so many different ways.
I was happy that she was doing anything to go after what she wanted to know about. I mean, including her mother's illness, including you know, all this mysticism, including, you know, everything she's doing all over to try to further herself, to try to figure out what's going on. She answers her questions. Whereas some people would just be like, yeah, whatever. I don't want to know about this. I don't want to know what's going on. You know, she really goes deep to figure out what's happening with her mother, what's happening in any world that she has a question about. And she's a great writer and soon to be my friend.
But I think that her exploration of all of those alleyways and tools are really critical to her getting to a far better place in life. You know, absolutely. I think that the easy route and the route that understandably is taken often is push down your feelings, pretend it doesn't exist, just try to survive, you know? And I think that her survival method was to learn and explore and understand. And that's really freed her so much.
I mean, I think the wolf very obviously is the mother. And I think I don't want to say the lamb is the dad, although to some degree he was. Although, like I said at the beginning of our discussion, my thoughts on him changed by the end. When he ultimately just took the mother's side every single time, no matter how absurd and ridiculous the mother was, and he still took her side, and he still went, you know, it was hard for me to just see him totally as the lamb. Maybe the survivor is clearly Orenda. I mean, there's no doubt. And maybe Christine to a lesser extent too. But she is the survivor of her own story. She's out the other end. She's way better off than she was when she started. You know, she started off with this dirt poor childhood. She had this rock and roll career. Now she's doing this professional dream analysis, living in her dream place out in California, having this sort of other life and not having to deal with this constant insanity of her mother and all the issues that surround it. So those would be my choices, I guess.
Okay, I think, you know, with outside of the obvious, I think The Wolf is like the husbands of Charlotte, the older sister. I mean, she would bring home just like the skeeziest, like preacher dudes.
That's true.
Right, their church is in a trailer and stuff, you know, it's like,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, and the treatment of the kids, and oh God, I think that her choices in men, you know
What? The Lamb, for me, I changed my mind. The Lamb is that one boy of her sisters who was he was slow, and ultimately they just kind of cut him off, and he ended up going to jail and all that.
Leroy,
I forget his name, but you guys know, you all know who I'm talking about.
Gabriel, and there was it Gabriel?
Yeah, but I think it's Leroy, but I could be so wrong.
No, yeah, you might be right. Yeah.
Well, it was one of them. Anyways, he was slow and he wasn't treated very well by the parents and by the various places he was moved around. And of course, the mother wouldn't take him, and she made up this story about how she woke up in the middle of the night and he was standing over her with a knife, and now everybody thinks that's bullshit, which probably was bullshit. Maybe he was the Lamb because he just got the short shrift in life. I mean, he never had an opportunity. He never had a chance.
I feel so bad for him.
Well, and this survivor, honestly, in addition to Orenda and her sister, is the uncle. Like the uncle that basically came and set them free. It's the mom's brother was like, none of this happened, you know. And I think it's just to show what he endured at her abuse and how he was able to set the girl straight.
He was literally the only person that wasn't afraid of her. So his relationship to her was completely different. And that's why he could cut through her bullshit, because he had no fear. And he knew that a lot of what she was doing was bullshit. I think the dad was definitely afraid of her. I think the kids were afraid of her, understandably. That brother, he could cut through it.
Well, and he was really a key to unlocking like you said, to help free them, because he validated things that they had experienced, sharing his own experiences. He is the one who revealed the truths about, she was not molested as a child, and basically was like, yeah, no, all those things that she told you were lies. And that was kind of where the glass shattered. And they were like, whoa, now what do we don't know what to believe, because what was a lie, what wasn't a lie. And it really seemed like he was such a good sounding board for them, and so supportive and so helpful. Yeah. So I'm with you, like definitely a huge survivor. I'm going to take a minute. And my minute this time, guys, is just please go read this book or listen to it. Honestly, listen to it. It's an incredible listen. I just love Orenda Fink's courage and her strength and her empathy, and also her absolute gifts as a writer. I mean, this is a very deep and difficult memoir that honestly read more like a novel. I don't know that I've ever read a memoir that was as much of a page turner as this, where you're just like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen next? Like, how do you deal with this? All of those things. And it's so far outside of my own experience and incredibly enlightening in terms of what, people go through in different kinds of families, and it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I would say it was maybe the least rock and roll of our rock and roll book club books, because while they do discuss Orenda's musical career and, the formation of Azure Ray, the breakup of Azure Ray, the high, but it really was, music was secondary to the life story and to her discovering, these things about her mother and her family upbringing and all of these other things. Like, that was really the main focus, and the music was sort of second. Whereas most of the time it's more musical memoir, and it's like, oh yeah, they had this little part about them growing up. This was all about their growing up. So it's different. And I think that it worked.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it was absolutely the right choice to make the music part of it just one of the things. It was a brave choice. She could have absolutely just kept it to the music.
Yeah.
And I think she made a very brave choice that we benefit from as readers, for sure.
Absolutely. And think of how she freed herself, and she was able to tell the story, and think of how many people she's helped or could be helping. I mean,
right?
It's just a gift.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Orenda.
Yes. Thank you, Orenda.
This is a beautiful book. And, while I was, missing my, skeezy rock stars and, crack smoking Sly Stones, because this book was so beautiful and it was so wonderful. And
the amount of crack smoked, say, in the Sly Stone book versus the Orenda Fink book, 0 in the Orenda Fink book, no crack smoked. Lots
no
of
freebasing.
Lots of crack smoked in Sly Stone, no crack smoked with Orenda Fink. So just for those keeping score, just so you know.
No consumption of cocaine in any way, shape, or form.
No. Not that was discussed,
Not that was discussed. Yeah. But then, I mean, you make a really important point that, anyone who has encountered a person with diagnosed as or suspected of having borderline personality disorder, I think will benefit so much from the experiences that she's shared. And I would imagine, it will help to make sense of their world, much like the book that she read about the borderline personality mother helped her make sense of her own world. And I do think she's going to help so many people.
Absolutely. I hope she writes more and more.
My 3 words that I would use to describe Orenda would be intense, committed, and beautiful. Those are the 3 things that I came up with for her. I would say my impression of her after reading the book is only more positive than it was before. Like I said, I have met her once or twice. I don't claim to be a friend or anything like that, but I really knew nothing about her life beyond her as a performer, right? As I knew her from Azure Ray. I know her from High Up. I know her from, as a solo artist. That's how I knew her. I knew nothing about her life beyond that. Now I have a much more complete picture. And unlike with maybe certain books where, like the Liz Phair book or whatever, where you leave and you're like, I kind of don't like her as much as I used to. This one is the opposite. I like Orenda Fink even more than I did going in. So my impression is stronger after reading the book.
Yeah. Okay. I will say brave, talented, and honest.
Yeah, for sure.
I love her. I didn't know a whole lot about her. I mean, the indie scene isn't necessarily my jam, but I mean, I think she's incredible. I've been listening to her music. I will keep exploring it. And I thank her for this.
My words, this is totally off the cuff, but I would say artist, and I mean that both in terms of music and writing. I'm just so impressed by how many gifts she has. I would say awesome, and by that I mean I'm in awe of her. And the courage that it took to write this book. And yeah, I would say, gosh, it's hard because I want to say strong. I want to say courageous. strong, courageous, because she deserves both of those. So yeah, like you guys, I mean, I only knew her as a musician, and my God, she is so much more than that. And I really am going to read whatever she puts out. I'm in. So get to step in, Orenda. Please write us something else.
Right.
And
Curious about what else she could write about, because this was so personal and so much about her own experience. Now, let's see her turn it into something different. Like, is she going to go in fiction? Is she going to be more of like, not a textbook, but you know what I mean? A book about these sort of disorders. She could write books about these issues that doesn't have to be rock and roll memoirs or whatever. That could just be about the things that she's learning, or dream analysis or whatever. I don't know. The possibilities are virtually endless at this point.
Well, this was a great discussion. Before we wrap it up, Dave, do you want to reveal our next?
Yes. Okay. The next book is Brothers by Alex Van Halen. This is the recent memoir from Alex Van Halen of Van Halen. And from what I understand, from what I've heard from the book, it is the tale of them growing up, because, they were born in Holland. They were immigrants. Mm-hmm. Their mother was Indonesian and their father was Dutch. They moved here to the United States from Holland, not speaking any English. Mm-hmm. And they had this really unique, not super unique, but I mean, immigrant experience of coming to America and realizing their dreams. And, so I think it's very interesting. Supposedly the story goes from their childhood up to about 1984, when Van Halen peaked with like Jump and Panama and all that. So we're not burdened by listening to stories about Sammy Hagar, just saying.
I still like Sammy Hagar. I don't know.
So that will be our next book, is Brothers by Alex Van Halen.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We appreciate you being a part of Rock and Roll Book Club. Like I said in the beginning, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We'll have links in the show notes, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you like what we do, spread the word. We'd love to have more people in the club. So Hope to see you next time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for watching.
Goodbye.
Thanks.